Hello there, faithful listener. You've tuned in to Season 7 of the Bible Explained podcast. So make sure to grab your cup of coffee, because today we are going to be discussing the book of 2 Samuel. Howdy and good morning, friends and faithful listeners. I hope you all are doing really well, and thank you so much for tuning in to the Bible Explained podcast on this lovely, lovely morning. Like I said, once again, the weather has just been so nice over the past few days. It's been like in the 70s and 80s here where I'm at, which is super unusual for this time of year, but I am not complaining at all. I am so excited over this wonderful warm weather. I have been outside as much as I can. I have the windows open, and my husband, who hates hot weather, never wants me to open the windows when it's warm like this. He always wants to put the air conditioning on, and I'm like, no, I don't want to put air conditioning on. I am going to open the windows. So when he's not at home, I turn the air conditioning off and I open the windows. And then when I know he's getting close to coming home, maybe like an hour beforehand, I'll shut all the windows and go turn the air conditioning on. But let me know, do you guys prefer hot weather or cold weather? I prefer something in the middle. I don't want too hot of weather, but 70s, 80s for me is like the perfect temperature. That's like perfectly warm and comfy. All right, guys, let's talk about 2 Samuel 3, 22 through 39 today, and we're going to be talking about a death that takes place between Joab and Abner. So let's read this. I'll be reading on the WEB as usual. Please feel free to grab your version of the Bible and also your cup of coffee or a cup of tea to share with me today as we read God's Word together. Behold, David's servants and Joab came from a raid and brought in a great plunder with them. But Abner was not with David in Hebron, for he had sent him away, and he had gone in peace. When Joab and all the army who was with him had come, they told Joab, Abner the son of Ner came to the king, and he has sent him away, and he has gone in peace. Then Joab came to the king and said, What have you done? Behold, Abner came to you. Why is it that you have sent him away, and he is already gone? You know Abner the son of Ner. He came to deceive you, and to know you're going out and you're coming in, and to know all that you do. When Joab had come out from David, he sent messengers after Abner, and they brought him back from the wall of Sirah. But David didn't know it. When Abner was returned to Hebron, Joab took him aside into the middle of the gate to speak with him quietly, and struck him there in the body so that he died, for the blood of Asahel his brother. Afterward, when David heard it, he said, I and my kingdom are guiltless before Yahweh forever for the blood of Abner the son of Ner. Let it fall on the head of Joab, and on all of his father's house. Let there not fail from the house of Joab one who has a discharge, or who is a leper, or who leans on a staff, or who falls by the sword, or who lacks bread. So Joab and Abishai, his brother, killed Abner, because he had killed their brother Asahel at Gibeon in battle. David said to Joab and to all the people who were with him, Tear your clothes, and clothe yourselves with sackcloth, and mourn in front of Abner. King David followed the bier. They buried Abner in Hebron, and the king lifted up his voice and wept at Abner's grave, and all the people wept. The king lamented for Abner and said, Should Abner die as a fool dies? Your hands weren't bound and your feet weren't put into fetters. As a man falls before the children of iniquity, so you fell. All the people wept again over him. All the people came to urge David to eat bread while it was yet day. But David swore, saying, God do so to me and more also if I taste bread or anything else, until the sun goes down. All the people took notice of it, and it pleased them, as whatever the king did pleased all the people. So all the people and all of Israel understood that day that it was not of the king to kill Abner the son of Ner. The king said to his servants, Don't you know that a prince and a great man has fallen today in Israel? I am weak today, though anointed king. These men, the sons of Zeruiah, are too hard for me. May Yahweh reward the evildoer according to his wickedness. Okay, so in order to understand what's happening today, we have to have a little bit of a backstory. So first and foremost, Abner. He was the military commander of King Saul. And after Saul died, Abner decided to make one of Saul's sons, Ish-Bosheth, the king. Even though Abner knew that David was supposed to be the king, as we found out the other day, because basically Abner said it, he was like, yeah, I know that God wanted David to be king. For some reason, Abner still decided to make Ish-Bosheth the next king of Israel. And he served Ish-Bosheth for several years until he and Ish-Bosheth got into this big fight over a woman, actually. And so Abner just leaves. He was like, you know what? I did so much for you, Ish-Bosheth. I am sick of you. I am sick of how your father's house has treated me for all of these years. Now, in the meantime, though, Abner had gained a whole lot of popularity, and he was very well known and respected in Israel. In fact, he may have been even more respected than Ish-Bosheth, who was the supposed king of Israel. So Abner decides to start helping David instead of Ish-Bosheth. So David, who doesn't exactly trust Abner because Abner had a long history with King Saul, right? He doesn't trust Abner, so he asks Abner to bring Michal back to David. Now, Michal was David's wife, and I would say actually closer to David's ex-wife, because she was married to somebody else and David was married to multiple people, but still David was very angry that Michal was taken from him. And so he tells Abner, send for Michal, and if you bring Michal here to me and take her away from her husband, then I will trust you. So Abner does that. Michal comes back to David, and David throws this big feast for Abner. And David forgives Abner for everything that Abner had done in the past. All the wars, all the times Abner tried to kill David throughout the years and sided with Saul, David decided to forgive Abner. Now this makes Joab, who was David's commander, very, very angry, because in one of the battles that Abner had against David and against Joab, Abner had killed Joab's younger brother Asael, and Joab never got over that. He was still very angry about it. So it says that David's servants and Joab came home from a raid and brought in a bunch of plunder with them. And it doesn't actually say who they were raiding, but it's possible that they were actually raiding the Philistines, because that's who Israel and Judah were in a war with. And he had a lot of plunder, so he was successful. But Abner had already returned back home because David had thrown this big feast and probably allowed Abner to stay for however long Abner wanted to stay. But Abner goes home in peace. He had made a peace treaty with David. So Joab gets super angry. He's like, how dare you make a peace treaty with Abner? He says to David, what have you done? Behold, Abner came to you. Why is it that you have sent him away, and he is already gone? You know Abner, the son of Ner. He came to deceive you, and to know you're going out and you're coming in, and to know all that you do. So Joab's like, are you foolish, David? Why would you let Abner go? He came directly to your doorstep. He's only making a peace treaty so that he can go back to Ish-Bosheth and wage another war against you. He's a spy. He's spying for Ish-Bosheth. Why would you trust him? Notice how Joab speaks to David here. He was not respectful to David at all. Whereas David, whenever we saw him communicating with a king or somebody who was an official or a priest, David was always so respectful. Even if he was angry at them, he was still always so respectful. And yet Joab here is not respectful to David at all. And this is probably far more common than how David acted towards kings. It was probably far more common for people to disrespect their elders and their priests and their kings than it was for people to respect them like David did. So after Joab is finished yelling at David, David doesn't actually say anything. And David just lets it go. So then Joab decides to take matters into his own hands. He sends messengers after Abner because he knows that Abner had just left and Joab had missed him. So he sends messengers to Abner, and it says that they brought him back from the well of Sirah. And David didn't know about it. So Joab kept this a secret. He did not tell David what he was doing. He acted on his own. And somehow Joab ends up getting Abner to come back. Maybe telling Abner, hey, we need to see you for one more thing, or oops, we forgot to talk about this issue, something. He somehow gets Abner back. As soon as Abner gets there. It says Joab takes him aside into the middle of the gate to speak with him quietly. This means that Joab took Abner somewhere very quiet and somewhere with not a lot of foot traffic, because Joab was trying to keep all of this a secret. And so he tries to get on Abner's good side, and he brings him to a quiet location. And as soon as Abner gets there and trusts Joab, because why wouldn't he trust Joab, right? Because he had just made peace with King David. So Abner had no reason not to trust Joab at this point in time, but Joab kills Abner. It says, for the blood of Asahel, his brother. Now, honestly, this was not fair. This was not fair towards Abner to die for this, because Asahel was trying to kill Abner during that battle. And Abner didn't actually want to kill Asahel, Joab's brother. In fact, he told Asahel, leave me alone so that I don't have to face your brother Joab. So Abner didn't want to kill Asahel, but he ended up having to because Asahel was going to kill Abner. But once again, Joab never let that go, even though it was years ago and it was in the middle of a battle and Abner was just trying to protect himself. It didn't matter. So he kills Abner. And David hears about it. And somehow he finds out that Joab did it, either because somebody told him, somebody had seen it, or because Joab just admitted that he did it. Because we know that Joab, moving forward, when we learn more about him, he's very brazen and he's very hot-headed. And maybe he just told David, like, yeah, I did it. What are you going to do about it, David? I don't know. So David hears about it. And he says, I and my kingdom are guiltless before Yahweh forever for the blood of Abner the son of Ner. Let it fall on the head of Joab and on all of his father's house. And so then David pronounces this really terrible curse on Joab and Joab's family, because it actually says that it wasn't just Joab who killed Abner. It was also Joab's other brother, Abishai, who killed Abner as well. So David pronounces this huge curse on Joab. He says, may there be lepers in your family. May there be people who are sick in your family. May there be people who die by the sword. May there be poor people in your family. That is what David is saying to Abner and Abishai, because David is so angry that they killed Abner behind his back. He was so angry about it, and he ends up pronouncing this huge curse on them. But he doesn't actually punish Joab or Abishai. In fact, he does nothing about it. He just lets Joab continue on his merry way. And we're definitely going to see that that is very typical for David. David does not issue a lot of punishments in his time as king. He was very lax with people, even with his own kids. It actually says, there's a verse in scripture that says David never disciplined his children. He never disciplined them. David wasn't much of a disciplinarian, as we can see, and so he doesn't even discipline Joab here. Instead, he pronounces this curse towards Joab, but still did not punish Joab at all for him killing Abner unjustly. It says here that David does force Joab and Abishai to put on sackcloth and ashes, though, which was the typical mourning tradition for when somebody died. Anybody who was mourning for that person, they would wear ugly clothes like sackcloth, and they would put ashes on their head to show that they were in distress, to show that they were mourning. And so David took off his kingly robes and put on sackcloth and ashes. And once again, this just shows the humility of David. David was a very humble person. He never thought very greatly of himself, and he never thought that he was so great that he couldn't mourn over somebody's death. And also, once again, this shows how David was so respectful of people as well. He was very respectful of Abner, who was a great military leader. He was respectful of the position. In fact, he calls Abner a prince. He says in verse 33, it says, the king lamented for Abner and said, should Abner die as a fool dies? Your hands weren't bound and your feet weren't put into fetters. As a man falls before the children of iniquity, so you fell. And then jumping down to verse 38, he says, "Don't you know that a prince and a great man has fallen today in Israel? I am weak today, though I am an anointed king." So that shows, that David was just so respectful of people who held positions of leadership, even though other people weren't respectful to David, such as Joab and Abishai, who decided to go against King David to kill Abner behind David's back. So David is mourning for Abner, and he's forcing all of his servants and Joab and Abishai to mourn for Abner as well. And it actually says that David followed Abner's cask. I had to look up what the word bier means. B-I-E-R. I had never heard that word once in my life, but a bier just means like a cask, a casket, where Abner was laid. And so it says King David followed the bier, meaning he followed the casket. So Israel is seeing everything that King David is doing. And don't forget that Abner was a well-respected man within Israel. And they would have been really angry had they found out that David had purposefully killed Abner. But now they're seeing David and all of David's servants lamenting over the death of Abner. And they see King David following after the casket where Abner is laid. And this actually makes Israel respect David all the more. So even though this was a terrible circumstance, and even though Joab committed a murder here, God used this to actually further King David's reputation, so that David wouldn't just be the king over Judah, but also over all of Israel soon as well. So the verse that says, "God uses everything for the good of those who love him," really is true. God can use even some of the worst circumstances in order to further his purpose for humanity. Well, friends and faithful listeners, I hope that you have a really fantastic rest of your day. Let me know if you have any prayer requests that you would like me to pray for, and I will write you down in my little prayer journal and pray for you. You can email me. You'll find my information listed in the description of this episode. Faithful listeners, have a fantastic and wonderful rest of your day. I will see you tomorrow for another episode from the book of Romans. Until then, happy listening and God bless.